Okay, this story is called The Fixer, and it begins like this. There once was a king, and he lived in a land that was very rich and had plenty of peace. And the thing about the king was, he was actually quite a happy man. He seemed to have everything. He had riches, he had a peaceful land, all that he'd want to eat, anything he wanted to get hold of. So he thought, I must be the happiest person in the whole land. But you know what it's like with kings? Sometimes they want to know if it's true or not. So one night he decided to dress up in an old cloak and go out and go around his city and see if there was anyone that seemed to be happier. And as he went round, he looked into the houses and saw many people who seemed to be struggling in one way or another. And he just felt, well, I surely must be the happiest man in this land. He was just about to go home when he saw the light in a small cottage right at the corner of the city. And he went to the window and looked in, and there was a young man in a white shirt, and he was playing the violin. And the king said, he looks very happy. I think I'll go and see what's going on there. He knocked on the door, and the door was opened, and this young man said, oh, come in, stranger, come. I've got a little bit left to eat. I've had my dinner, but there's some left for you. Come and have something. And the king said, oh, all right. And as he talked, he said, you seem very happy. He said, yeah, I must be one of the happiest people in the land. You see, I am a fixer. So I spend the morning fixing things. I get a coin for that every day. And in the afternoon, I can practice my violin. And in the evening, I cook my meals and I have a lovely time. So I reckon I must be the happiest person in the whole land, because you see, the king who lives up in that castle, I know that he has so much responsibility with so much wealth. It must be hard for him. Well, the king went home that night and he actually didn't sleep too well. And he thought, he does seem to be happier than me. I'm going to see if I can make him a little bit more challenged. So he called in his chancellor and said, could you pass a new edict in the land saying, no one is allowed to pay anyone to fix anyone's things tomorrow? And so it went out. And that next night he dressed in his cloak again and went back to the house, and their little window was just as bright. Looked in the window and the young man seemed just as happy. And he knocked on the door and the young man opened it. Oh, hello again, come on in. And the king said, well, you seem very happy. He said, yes, but I want to tell you about something. That there's a king of this land and he's done a very strange thing. You know, just today he put out a law saying no one was allowed to fix anything for anyone else. So, of course, that was my job gone, and there was no way I could get any money. So what did you do? Said the king, leaning forward. Well, said the young man, I was just walking home and I saw a man clean out his stable. And I said, could I help you? He said, yeah, I'll give you a coin every day if you come and help me. And so I did. I cleared it out. It took me actually a very little time. I cleaned it, came back, got my violin out, practiced, and had my dinner, and here I am. Wonderful, I've got a job, had enough to eat, and I'm so happy. Well, the king went home again, feeling a little bit frustrated. And next morning he passed a rule saying, no one is allowed to fix anything for anybody else, and no one's allowed to have someone clean their stables or clean anything for them. And that night he went back, and there was light in the window, and looked in, and there the young man looked just as happy as he had before. The king knocked on the door in his disguise, and the young man took him in again and told him, the king's getting very strange. He said, not only am I allowed not to fix something, but also I'm not allowed to clean stables. Well, said the king, and how is it that you've got money for your food today? He said, well, he said, I realised that if the king's going to pass laws like that, I better get some other way of income. So we're at peace just now, and I decided I would join the army, because I know they give them a coin every day, and not only that, it's only exercising in the morning and the afternoons are free. So I'm now a soldier. Look, I've got a fine sword here. And I go in the mornings and exercise, and it's not too hard. Come back in the afternoon, I play my violin and cook my meal. I'm a very, very happy man. Well, the king that night really didn't sleep. He tossed and turned. In the morning he got up and he said to his chancellor. Now, the law is this: no one is allowed to fix anything for anybody else. No one is to pay anyone to do cleaning or anything like that. And the whole of the army is not to be paid for a day, from the general to the newest recruit. Well, that night he went to the cottage expecting to see the young man unhappy. Instead, the young man was just as happy. The king knocked on the door in his disguise and said, "What's happened? Have you stolen this time?" "No," he said. "There's something wrong with the king. I think he's gone a little bit strange in the head. But you know how I told you I'd joined the army? Well, we're not paid for a day. We'll get paid tomorrow, but for the day we're not getting paid. So I thought, well, here's my sword. I'm not using it, and it's a good sword. So I took the blade off, and I fitted a wooden blade on it so I can put it into the sheath like this. And I took the blade to the pawnbroker and said, 'Can you give me a coin just for the day for my meal, and I'll bring you back tomorrow the coin?' And the pawnbroker, who's a friendly man, said, 'All right, I'll keep this as surety. That'll be fine. So tomorrow I'll be able to get my 2 coins, I'll get my sword back, and everything will be fine.' Well, the king went home and thought of a very good scheme. The next morning, he called the general in the army and asked him to bring the youngest and newest recruit. Of course, he knew it was the young man. When the young man came in, he didn't recognize the king in all his fancy clothes, and the king said to him, 'Now, I have something for you to do. This man here,' and he pointed to a man who had been brought in by the jailers, 'he is guilty of a crime that deserves death. I want you to behead him.' And he knew perfectly well that if the new soldier, pulled out his sword, then all would be revealed. So he sat back somewhat smugly. Well, the young man said, 'Well, I'm betting you I've never done this before. I don't think I'll do it properly. Please don't.' No. The king said, 'You are to do this. It's my command.' And the young man looked sadly at his general and then at the king. He said, 'Well, before I do that, can I say a prayer?' And the king said, 'Okay, but make it a short one.' 'It'll be very short,' said the young man. And he said, 'Okay, here's my prayer. Lord God, if this man standing before me is innocent, I ask that you turn my sword into wood.' And he drew out his sword, and it was wood. The general was amazed, and the king, who knew the secret, couldn't say a thing about it, or he'd have blown his disguise. He looked at the young man for a minute, and then he smiled and said, 'Young man, I think I've a job for you in my court, because you truly are not only a happy young man, but very, very resourceful.' And that's the story of the fixer. Thank you.